shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is end-time newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, the news program that reports the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. Welcome to 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Egyptian newspaper El Watan reported that a group of Egyptian lawyers have filed criminal terrorism charges in the International Criminal Court against Barack Obama and his half-brother Malik Obama. The legal charges against Mr. Obama, the U.S. president, alleges that he has committed crimes against humanity for his support of the Muslim Brotherhood, which has been declared a terrorist organization in Egypt. Half-brother Malik Obama is employed as the executive secretary of the Islamic Dawah Organization. The IDO was established by the Sudanese government, and the U.S. State Department has officially branded Sudan as a state sponsor of terrorism. Sudan's president is Omar al-Bashir, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court on 7 counts relating to crimes against humanity. Al-Bashir is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. The purpose of Malik Obama's IDO is to spread radical Wahhabist Islamic ideology across the African continent. Malik Obama controls the purse strings of the organization's money used to advance jihadist Islam in Africa. The legal charges against the Obama brothers was brought to the International Criminal Court by Egyptian law professor Dr. Nabil Medhat Salim, a member of the Egyptian Bar Association. The charges allege that Barack Obama and brother Malik aided the Muslim Brotherhood takeover of Egypt, which resulted in the deaths of thousands of people, the burning of Coptic churches, and rape and destruction. The Egyptian lawyers accuse Barack Obama of teaming up with the Muslim Brotherhood before and after the revolution, and that President Obama supplied weapons and ammo to the Muslim Brotherhood-controlled government of Mohammed Morsi, which were used to kill Egyptian citizens. The charges filed at the International Criminal Court allege that Barack Obama, quote, cooperated, incited, and assisted the armed elements of the Muslim Brotherhood in the commission of crimes against humanity in the period from 3/7/2013 to 8/18/2013 in the Arab Republic of Egypt. The complaint against Barack Obama and the Muslim Brotherhood claims that Egyptian Christians were subjected to persecution, including death, torture, and the plundering and burning of 85 churches. The document mentions the death of a 10-year-old Egyptian girl who was shot and killed as she walked to a Bible class. It mentions a young Coptic priest who was tortured to death, and the murder of 2 girls, Christian girls, who were riddled with bullets as they attended a Christian wedding. Here in the United States, we see more evidence of Muslim Obama's ongoing persecution of Christians in the U.S. Armed Forces. 2 Baptist military chaplains have accused the Department of Veteran Affairs of forcing them out of a chaplain training program after they refused orders to stop quoting the Bible and praying in the name of Jesus Christ. The Conservative Baptist Association of America is suing the department and Secretary Eric Shinseki. The chaplains allege that they were subjected to ridicule and harassment that led to one chaplain quitting the program and the other chaplain being removed from the program. Navy chaplain Lieutenant Commander Dan Klinder and retired Army Chaplain Major Stephen Furtko were enrolled in the Veterans Affairs Department of Defense Clinical Pastoral Education Center program in San Diego. It was led by a VA employee described as openly hostile toward Christianity. The lawsuit alleges that the program director said that VA policy prohibits chaplains from praying in the name of Jesus, and that she reportedly warned the chaplains not to quote biblical scriptures in her classroom, that she mocked their views about good and evil in the world, and said that anybody who believes that Jesus Christ is the only way to God has no place in the program. Now, in North Korea, another communist government, the communists reportedly executed 80 people in 7 cities for offenses ranging from possession of a Holy Bible to watching South Korean television programs. The executions were held in public arenas. Thousands of people were compelled to watch the victims being killed by executioners firing machine guns. The Stuxnet computer malware has seriously infected the internal network of a Russian nuclear power plant. It is the same computer worm that caused chaos in Iran's uranium facilities in Natanz. No country has claimed responsibility for developing Stuxnet, but it's believed that it was developed by American and Israeli intelligence agencies. The revelation about the Russian nuclear plant's infection was made by Eugene Kaspersky, founder of antivirus software company Kaspersky Labs, and first reported by Australia's SC magazine. He was speaking at a conference in Canberra. Mr. Kaspersky said he was tipped off about the infection of the Russian nuclear plant by a technician at the facility. The technician disclosed that the virus was carried to the Russian plant on a USB thumb drive. Mr. Kaspersky also disclosed that Stuxnet has infected the International Space Station. Problems are mounting for Obamacare. The White House and Department of Health and Human Services are not responding to reports that fewer than 50,000 Americans have purchased a health care plan on the troubled healthcare.gov website. Making it even worse, Bill Clinton has chastised Barack Obama, telling him that he's obligated to keep his word. And one Democratic Congressman, Kurt Schrader, has accused Mr. Obama of grossly misleading the American people. I'm Rick Wiles. We're going to take a break. I'll be back in a minute with my guest.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the end-time newscast.
This is Max McLean. Let us praise our God together. Listen to the Bible from Zephaniah 3. Sing, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O Israel. Be glad and rejoice with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. The Lord has taken away your punishment. He has turned back your enemy. The Lord, the King of Israel, is with you. Never again will you fear any harm. On that day, they will say to Jerusalem, do not fear, O Zion. Do not let your hands hang limp. The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. From Zephaniah 3, listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
Hear more at radiobible.org. That's radiobible.org.
This is True News. We report the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. Various U.S. presidents are marked forever by statements that they made. Richard Nixon's famous line was, I'm not a crook. George Herbert Walker Bush will be remembered for saying, read my lips, no new taxes. Bill Clinton will be forever remembered for the line, I did not have sex with that woman. And what about Barack Obama? Well, no doubt it will be the line. If you like that plan, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Well, former President Bill Clinton admonished President Obama today that he is obligated to fulfill his commitment to the American people. So you know things are getting really bad for you when Slick Willie lectures you about keeping your word. The problem for Obamacare is that they can't keep their word. The scheme requires forcing insurers to cancel tens of millions of existing policies. In 7 weeks, Obamacare is mandatory for all Americans. The IRS is empowered to levy fines for those who do not comply, despite the fact that the $700 million healthcare.gov website doesn't work. Furthermore, there are many religious organizations such as hospitals, food banks, children's homes that will shut their doors rather than comply with Obamacare mandates. Religious retailer Hobby Lobby is prepared to shut down all of their stores if they lose their Supreme Court case. And let's not forget that millions of Americans will see their work hours reduced to 29 hours thanks to Obamacare. Well, the whole thing's a colossal mess, but Mr. Obama shows no signs of humbling himself by admitting he's in over his head. With 7 weeks remaining to fix the website, how will the IT experts do it? Can it be done? And what are the security risks for people who submit private data on the site? Mr. John McAfee, founder of computer antivirus company McAfee Associates, is on the telephone to help us understand the scale of the government's problems with Obamacare. I also want to ask him a lot of questions about other cyber issues. Mr. McAfee, welcome to True News.
Well, thank you, Rick. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, let's just start with the website. In private industry, if a company spent $700 million on a website that didn't work, somebody would be out the door really fast. That's not going to happen here with the government. They've got 7 weeks to get it together. Can it be done? Can something this size be fixed in 7 weeks?
Well, absolutely not fixed. It can be polished in 7 weeks. They can get the system into enough condition that people will be able to log on and register. However, it boils down to a bad architecture. What they're trying to do is they created, let's say, a house made out of rice paper, and they're trying to put a steel door on the front door. They can put that steel door on, but that's not going to make any difference. A spoon will be able to cut through the rice paper and get in, and it's the same thing electronically. Without changing the architecture, which means throwing it away and starting over, the system will be so full of holes that only a madman would use it.
But we're going to be required by the government to use it. There are tens of millions of people that will have to use it, or the IRS is going to come after them. So you're telling me that they're going to submit private, confidential medical information online and financial information on a government website that's not secure.
Oh, well, I'm not. They can come after me if they wish. I value my privacy, and by putting the information in that they are requesting, I might as well mail every hacker in the world and say, here is my Social Security number, my birth date, my passwords, and every piece of information that you need to empty my bank account. And to save you the trouble, I've signed some blank checks, and here they are. I mean, I might as well do that. I'm not going to do that.
Now, several weeks ago, it was revealed, that in the fine print, the website says that you have no right to privacy. But you pointed out in another interview that it doesn't matter what they say. If the government says, well, we're going to remove that language, it really doesn't matter because, as you pointed out, there are a lot of government agencies that are already empowered to access that data.
Well, it's a thing called FISMA, F-I-S-M-A, the Federal Information Security Management Act, which requires all government agencies to alert the people that if you submit any data on a government server, the government has full right to access that data and give it to whoever they want for whatever purpose they want. And this came out of the original Patriot Act. And keep in mind, the Patriot Act was the procedures and processes to allow us to intercept terrorist communications. And so they don't know they were terrorists, but they can at any time evoke that act and say, well, we want to look at what you're doing just to make sure. And then we can pass that information to anybody we want. So they take the language out, they can keep it in, it makes no difference. The law requires that the government alert us that they will use our data any way they see fit.
Okay, we're going into the holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Realistically, what do you expect that will happen with Obamacare, the healthcare.gov website by January? Realistically, what do you think is going to be happening with it?
I think that they will fix the bottlenecks to allow larger numbers of people to register and submit their information. But the security holes will merely increase. Any change that you make, it's like, so they're putting a steel door on the front of a paper house.
Mm-hmm.
That merely weakens the front of the paper, which you could have walked through anyway. It's just making it worse from a security standpoint. Again, I'm only talking from a security standpoint. That's my issue. That's my interest, and that's my expertise. And so from a security standpoint, it's going to be more of a nightmare. It may look very nice on the surface, very polished, very smooth, very pretty, and people go, oh, that's great, it's fixed. No, it's not fixed. It's made worse.
On another issue, Eugene Kaspersky revealed at a conference in Canberra, Australia, that Stuxnet has infected a Russian nuclear power plant and the International Space Station.
Well, that's absolutely true. We're in the world of cyber warfare. In fact, we might as well stop calling it anything but cyber warfare. If you have any wars at all, it will be cyber warfare. Keep in mind, we're in an era where our guns are controlled by computers, where our tanks are controlled by computers. Certainly our bombs are controlled by computers. Our power structures are composed by computers, are composed of computers. So basically, the person that controls the computer controls the weapon. And it's so easy to get into these systems. Here's what's happened. Our technology has advanced so rapidly that we have created systems that could be turned against us with a snap of a finger by a child almost. Anybody who wants to dig into the ins and outs of security software could figure out how to tap into any system that we have, whether it be a nuclear power plant or a smart bomb. So our security has not kept up with other advances. And Eugene is correct. They did get into the power station, and it is on the space station. And it was not done maliciously by the people who are working for the power station or who inhabit the space station. It is done by a thing called human engineering, where we watch people and see how they behave. Are they curious? Are they not curious? Do they cheat on their wives? And after a few weeks of watching, we know exactly what to do to get that person to take something in for us, unbeknownst to that person. And it's usually done on a thumb drive or some other USB device that they have no knowledge of it containing malware.
How dangerous is Stuxnet? Potentially, what could happen?
I wouldn't worry. I'm sorry to laugh, but I wouldn't worry about Stuxnet. There are thousands of people who are doing similar things now. The Chinese, in fact, the Chinese are so laissez-faire about their cyber warfare. They don't even bother to hide who it is that wrote the program or where it came from. They have that much arrogance, and they have a great deal of technology. Now, I know that Eugene Kaspersky believes that the Russians have the highest technology, and that might be because he is Russian himself. However, I firmly believe that the Chinese have a far greater understanding of this area and a far greater penetration. And it's the Chinese I would be watching. But no, it's dirt simple, sir.
John, I started this radio program in the late 1990s, and that was a time of Y2K. And I still remember a statement that former CIA Director George Tenet made in testimony to Congress regarding Y2K, and it stuck in my mind because he said that of the tens of thousands of IT specialists who were brought into the United States from India and Pakistan and Arab countries and many countries around the world, that no background checks had been done on these people. And I remember thinking then, well, this is insane. How do we know that some country did not send in thousands of IT people, for the purpose of planting something on major U.S. infrastructure that would be timed released 10, 15 years later? Is there any possibility that happened?
Well, certainly it's possible, but it would not be necessary for that to happen. Let me give you a simple example of how malware is planted within top secret organizations. Let's assume that you work for the NSA or for a nuclear power plant. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, what are your interests in life, Rick? What interests you? What hobbies, for example?
Oh, hiking, outdoors, things like that.
Okay, so now, let's say that I take a thumb drive, okay, and I lay it outside your car when you've parked and you've gone hiking, okay, mm-hmm. and when you come back, you pick it up because it's red and you're curious, and you turn it over, and on the back is a label that says beautiful photographs of Pikes Peak area. Or an unseen part of the national forest that you've never seen, but you would like to have gone to. It's likely that you're going to take that home and drop it in your computer and look at the pictures. What if we wait until you're at work and we plant it in the parking lot when you're coming back from lunch? You might be likely to take it in and put it on your work system just to see what these pictures are. And we will put those beautiful pictures in there. We're also going to put a program that as soon as you plug it in, runs on your system and moves to every other system within that facility. It is dirt simple. Mm-hmm. We don't need to have people from China or from Russia come here and train for years to try to get into that secret security system. No. We let you do it for us.
If the story is true, they were handing out thumb drives at the G20 summit meeting in St. Petersburg, compliments of Vladimir Putin. And supposedly a number of diplomats received them.
Right, of course, and they have not been trained enough to know that they should immediately throw it in the garbage and wash their hands just in case. Seriously, this is the problem. We think that we will solve our security issues by high-tech measures. Well, we cannot if we do not also solve the human engineering issue by training our diplomats and training our staff within top-secret facilities the techniques of avoiding being humanly engineered by the opposition. Mm-hmm. This is the fundamental problem. This is our weakness, and this is how people get in.
And I can say this, as a radio host, people mail thumb drives to me. Rick, check this out. And I'm like, are you serious? That thumb drive's going in the trash. I don't care if it came from my grandmother's going into the trash can.
Of course. In fact, burn them because you don't know that it came from your grandmother. Anybody can write your grandmother's return address, so you have no clue.
That's right.
So throw these things away. Never accept any electronic media from anyone under any circumstances, period. And yet we do it at will. We do it with glee. This is our craziness. We spend tens of millions of dollars on security programs, and then we just pick up a thumb drive and go, oh, wow, I've been looking for something like this, and we plug it in. Well, no, it doesn't work that way.
Grid X2 starts tomorrow in the United States. A number of electrical service utilities, plus FEMA and the FBI and a lot of federal agencies, including Canada and Mexico, are participating in this scenario for a major cyber attack on the electrical grid system. How vulnerable is the electrical grid system?
It's as vulnerable as any system to the human frailties of the people who staff these systems or who staff these facilities. As I said, I can guarantee that they're not looking at the human side of the equation. They're looking at, okay, can I hack into this enormously secure facility? Well, probably not. But can I get someone working there to do it for me? Absolutely yes. And here's the problem. No one is addressing the human aspect, and it is the human aspect that causes our grave holes. Now, there are major exceptions. Obamacare, for example, you don't need human engineering there. Anybody can get in technically because they have architected it improperly. So in that case, I wouldn't have to worry about dropping a thumb drive in front of someone working in one of the exchanges. I just hack in myself, as anybody can.
The next world war, is it going to start with a major cyber attack, lights out, everything goes dark?
Yes, I anticipate the next world war. The people who are the aggressors will be sitting at home in armchairs while their software turns our weapons against ourselves.
Now, that's a scary thought, what you just said. While they turn our weapons against ourselves.
Yes. This is the thing that I'm saying, that cyber warfare is no longer a war that involves soldiers and people in the field and men manning airplanes. No, it's going to be done by very brilliant technicians and very brilliant human engineers that plant the appropriate software, and software being designed by those brilliant technicians, and at the switch of a button, the 50 caliber machine gun that's automatically controlled. And by the way, these 50 caliber guns are being sold in Texas to the general public now for deer hunting and other things. I've seen videos of them. It's spectacular. You don't have to touch the gun. It finds a target, aims and fires, and never misses. And this is also computer controlled. So everything, all of our guns, our bombs, believe me, they will be turned against us. This is how it's going to happen. And call me crazy. Everybody does anyway. But this is it. This is how it's going to happen.
Let's talk about the NSA. Unless you're living under a rock, you're not paying attention to what's happening, it's obvious that there is no privacy left in the world anywhere. The numbers that we've seen published in The Guardian and other publications indicating that something like 130 billion telephone calls per month being monitored by the NSA. Is this our future? Is there any chance we're ever going to see privacy again, or have we lost it forever?
Well, it's going to be unbelievably sad if we have lost it forever. Because without our privacy, what are we? If we can't have the privacy to talk to our sons and daughters about the facts of life and about issues of depth without people listening to us, when we can't have communion with our spouses without someone watching, when we can't have a private moment anywhere without people seeing, looking, hearing, and judging. No, we can't live that way. This cannot be the way. I mean, I think that George Orwell's 1984 showed us what a horror that would be, and a horror it would be. We have to do something, sir. We can't just sit back and say, oh, Jesus, this is happening, and throw up our hands. We elected this government. We did not elect a government to spy on us or to tell us what to do or how to do it. I think that when Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson sat down, they envisioned a government that would build our roads and staff our schools and create communication systems and be of service to us rather than we being the children that they monitor and control. I don't like being in kindergarten.
And with the power that they have through the technology right now, the danger is there will not be any opposition formed because they will know who is organizing to bring down their power structure.
Allegedly, we still have a constitution, and we still have a judiciary, and we still have a government which functions, no matter how strangely or insanely. We voted these people in, all of us. We can vote them out, and you're not going to find a replacement within the current party system, I can assure you, because the power structure is so ingrained. We have the power to change this. Do we have the courage? I don't know. I do. Do you?
Absolutely, and I've been warning about this day for 15 years on the radio, and now it's here, and I'm finding so many people willing to accept it. Like, you tell them what the government is doing, and they just yawn, and they don't care. That's what troubles me.
I mean, I think they will care when someone breaks through their door and says, listen, the discussion you just had with your son about whatever is not politically acceptable, and we're going to take you off for retraining. At that point, I believe you will care.
I agree.
But that's going to be too late. That's going to be way too late. Right now, we have the opportunity. Right now, we have the power. And right now, if we had the will, you and I and every other citizen in this country could change this country. Do we have the will? That's the issue. That's the issue.
One last question. You're planning to launch a product called D-Central. What is it?
It is a device that communicates with your smartphone. It's just a piece of hardware, has no screen or keyboard. It has an on-off switch. When you turn it on, it creates a private an invisible network that if you can still surf the web on your phone and get whatever data you want, you can find out what time the restaurants open and close. But if you want to send a private communication, you use the private network. It cannot be monitored. It cannot even be seen.
John, what happens when the government thugs show up and say, "John, you're going to alter this device for us"?
Well, I think that they'll probably end up in federal prison, or I will leave the country. I'm not sure. At some point, someone's got to stand up. I'm 68 years old, so it's not like I have a lot of time left to be concerned about. So maybe I can be just a little more arrogant and a little more uncautious than the average American. But I will not bow to it.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. We need more people with this attitude. My guest, John McAfee, founder of McAfee Associates. John, thank you. Appreciate you taking time to be with us today.
You're welcome, sir.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
Do you need to hear from God? He will speak to the spirit of anyone who honestly seeks Him. Here's today's moment with Charles Stanley.
And I can remember on one occasion, and I was just going through a real difficult time and asking God, why don't you let's get on with this, just like all of us do at times. We get impatient. And I remember kneeling there and just struggling and weeping a little bit. And you know how God speaks to you. I know how He speaks to me. Could not have made this any clearer. It's like He whispered to me, you can trust perfect love. All of a sudden, for me personally, I knew that this God who loved me was saying, my love for you is such, it is trustworthy in any and every given situation in your life. What you are going through, you can trust that I am loving you through this no matter what you feel. Perfect love is trustworthy.
You can trust God's perfect love to forgive your sin and give you a home in heaven. Learn about the salvation only God can provide when you click All Things Are New at intouch.org.
You're listening to True News, your alternative source for global news, analysis, and commentary. I'm Rick Wiles. I'm going to tell you two true stories about real events in two separate socialist dictatorships. And you tell me the name of the socialist dictatorship where each event happened. Okay, story number one. In socialist dictatorship number one, the currency is being debased by the government. Economists are expecting a devaluation of the currency in the near future and the onset of hyperinflation. The socialist dictator's popularity is sinking as people become increasingly frustrated with the failure of his socialist policies and runaway corruption in the government. In an attempt to turn the tide, the socialist dictator ordered military troops to seize the country's biggest retail store chain. The chain is the equivalent of Best Buy in the USA. Troops moved in and seized all of the company's stores and slashed prices on all the electronics on the store shelves. Jubilant shoppers lined up for hours to carry off TV screens, computers, washers, dryers, appliances at major discounted prices. Compliments of the socialist dictator and the military. Now, in socialist dictatorship number two, heavily armed police raided the home of an investigative news journalist who was uncovering corruption in the government. The reporter's private notes were seized. The raid on the reporter's home was carried off under the guise of an investigation into her husband based on charges he faced in the 1980s. Name the two socialist dictatorships. Well, if you guessed Venezuela for socialist dictatorship number one, you're correct. Socialist dictatorship number two is the United States of America. The raid on the reporter's home happened recently in the state of Maryland, the colonial state that originally was known as the Free State. Washington Times reporter Mr. Guy Taylor is on the telephone to give us the details about this very troubling event in Maryland. He is the State Department correspondent for the Washington Times. Mr. Taylor, welcome to True News.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I appreciate you taking time from your schedule. You're at Capitol Hill right now, and we want to hear from somebody inside the Times the real story about what happened, because this sounds like a story out of a dictatorship, out of Central America or South America or a Caribbean island. But this happened to a reporter in the state of Maryland who works for your paper, the Washington Times. So give us
right. Yeah. Well, let me just start with this, Rick. The reporter's name is Audrey Hudson. A couple of facts I think we should probably throw out so we can steer the conversation in the way I think it should go. One is that this reporting at question that Audrey Hudson had done for the Washington Times was actually reporting that she did during the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, and she was pointing out it was a very specific series of stories that she'd done, and one in particular where she pointed out that federal agents working for this relatively new at the time 2006 program of federal air marshals, and this is where under the Department of Homeland Security, which, as you know, was created after sort of deck chair rearranging after 9/11 by the Bush administration. Within Homeland Security, there's this federal air marshals program, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is the program that puts clandestinely puts commonly dressed armed federal agents on commercial flights to monitor whether or not there might be hijackers on the plane. And the story that Ms. Hudson had written was actually about how agents testifying, or officials from the Federal Air Marshal Service testifying before Congress about the scope of their program, were actually fudging the numbers and essentially lying to Congress, saying that the program was bigger than it actually was, and that they were able to field undercover agents onto more commercial flights than they actually were doing. And you can imagine, if you pick that apart, why that's a fairly incendiary thing to write, particularly if it's true, because it would suggest that commercial flights in the years after 9/11 were actually not as safe as this federal agency that had been created by this massive deck chair rearranging was saying that they were. So years go by. Ms. Hudson has gone on. She's written for a variety of other publications. The Washington Times has those stories archived on its website. And now recently, this past summer, there was a search on Ms. Hudson's house. And I'll get into specifically what made the search come about based on my reporting and talking to Audrey, the reporter, and her husband and whatnot. But during the search, there was a federal agent there from the U.S. Coast Guard Service who formerly had been working at the Air Marshal Service when Miss Hudson wrote these stories, and he began asking her questions about, was she the same Audrey Hudson as the reporter from the Washington Times who used to write those Air Marshal stories, and she had responded yes. And during the search, afterwards, it occurred to Ms. Hudson, about a month afterwards, that during the search, the Maryland State Police and the federal agents actually combed through her private office and dug out a very specific little cache of old files that referred to some sensitive material relating to those stories. I mean, it looked like they were on some kind of a hunt to find out who the sources for those stories had been. This has now played out. We're in a situation where there's potential pending legal movements from both sides. But let me give a little bit more context now. So why were the police there to begin with? What happened was Ms. Hudson's husband, who is a U.S. Coast Guard employee and works with ordnance and whatnot, had somehow been red flagged at some point by most likely the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, because of an internet purchase. Whether it's not clear when you dig into this, and I encourage people to go read the story, and hopefully you'll link to it. But it's not clear. At some point, he became flagged so that the ATF alerted basically the Internal Affairs Division of the U.S. Coast Guard, and this U.S. Coast Guard investigator, to go in and take a look at this employee and make sure, there's a proper background check and whatnot. So the Coast Guard investigator starts this investigation and finds out that, in fact, Miss Hudson's husband has a rap sheet that's pretty old that involves having been in possession of a firearm when he was in his early 20s, didn't have the right paperwork for it, had an arrest on there. And in the state of Maryland, like a handful of states around the country, it kind of goes state to state. Some states are more libertarian with their gun laws. Maryland happens to be one where if you have a federal conviction in the past, you can't legally possess firearms if that conviction was related to firearms in the past. So this Coast Guard investigator puts together suddenly like this case where he begins sort of shopping around to Maryland State Police and saying, well, this is a Maryland state law. I'm going to request that Maryland State Police collude with me. We'll get a legitimate search warrant to go into this guy's home and see if he's got any illegal firearms. Part of this Coast Guard investigator's initial probe prior to the search warrant involves scanning digital media, social media, found some stuff on Facebook that looked like it was a reference by the reporter's husband to gun ownership, used that basically as probable cause, as well as this earlier ATF flagging of, now this is where it gets kind of over the top, but supposedly the gentleman had, the reporter's husband had at some point bought what's called a potato gun via the internet from a company in Europe, particularly in Sweden. Apparently there's some kind of case file or something where the ATF has a watch on these types of transactions because their belief, and this is stated in the search warrant, that potato gun is actually code language for silencers for large weapon guns. So all of this goes into the search warrant. Maryland State Police are able to actually get a federal judge to sign off on the search warrant. And lo and behold, middle of the night, the group of Maryland State Police and this Coast Guard agent, who is the same one that I mentioned before, who began asking the reporter questions during the search, go in. They find a few handguns, smaller arms, none of which no charges have ever come of this. However, during the search, that's when they began combing through the reporter's private office and found this stuff. About a month after the search, out of the blue, the still no charges filed, the Coast Guard investigator phones up the reporter's husband and says, hey, there's a package of stuff that we got during the search that we got to get back to you. At this point, the reporter and her husband are thinking, well, what the heck is this? And they get the package back, and lo and behold, it is these files that have to do with sensitive reporting records from her work doing these air marshal stories. So that's pretty much the thick and thin of it, as objectively as I can tell it, without sort of taking the bait of trying to lean one way or another on this story.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that, Guy. Do you think that they were that the entire raid was a cover to get into Mrs. Hudson's?
I don't know. I mean, I think it certainly carries the appearance of that. My own judgment on it, Rick, is that within the multitude of federal agencies and federal law enforcement agencies, it doesn't matter who's in the White House. You're going to have periods where there are individuals who will engage in this type of activity. It's part of having a huge government, and so it's possible that this thing started out as a simple investigation into the reporter's husband and somehow escalated into targeting specific files in her home. It would certainly feel that way, and that would that narrative falls in line with a variety of other instances, and where I think the Obama administration comes into it is that one of the things that President Obama really pushed for during his first term was this kind of this nebulous sort of war on leaks, this idea that his administration was going to take leaks of classified information to journalists far more seriously than the Bush administration had, even though there were a couple of really high-profile leak cases during the Bush years, and that, under that type of rhetoric from the center, the head of the administration, the president himself, that people in these agencies who might think that this was somehow the type of behavior that would be acceptable in a free society with a very aggressive and full-throttled free press, they feel like they have a little more wiggle room, and we start to have instances like this. In that respect, I know you're going to have listeners who are going to sure comment and say, well, this is outrageous. But just from where I sit, trying to be an objective look at it, my own personal take is that the big question, which will probably not come out until there's further legal back and forth between the journalist, the Washington Times, and the U.S. Coast Guard in the state of Maryland, is at what point did the Coast Guard agent become aware that his probe into this kind of vague gun charge of this journalist's husband, at what point did he become aware that she, the journalist, was actually part of the investigation? At some point he realized that their house was a fairly target-rich place, and so was that, how early in the probe was that? Was it something that there was anyone else at the U.S. Coast Guard or the ATF or the Air Marshal Service where this Coast Guard investigator previously worked? Is it something that he had shared with other people, or possibly even taken orders from anyone from? So when you really get into like the nitty gritty on these things, where the rubber actually meets the road, those are the kind of questions that will come up.
Yes, but when you put this together with other things, such as the Justice Department spying on the Associated Press and the NSA, gathering massive amounts of information on phone calls and electronic communications. When you start putting it all together, it becomes a chilling picture.
It really does, particularly because the last time that this became a mainstream topic of conversation in this country was during the Watergate era, during the Nixon era, and it was like we moved way past that as a society and a news media, and to somehow feel like the tables have all turned and there's now alternative leadership in the White House and this is happening again is really disconcerting. But I also think that the New York Times case is one that has gotten a lot of more mainstream media has really gotten into. A reporter named James Risen, who'd written a book where he has never named any of the sources. However, the CIA decided that one of the main sources in the book, and this had to do with the Clinton administration's policy toward Iran, that one of these sources had leaked classified information. That CIA agent is in jail at this point. He's been charged, and this reporter, James Risen, is running around trying to protect and say that he didn't have to give up his source. And what's come out during that case is that it's not really clear from a purely legal standpoint whether or not the U.S. Constitution protects journalists from revealing their sources. And so I think that case is probably going to go to the Supreme Court in the coming year, and we're going to hear more about that. But sorry, go ahead.
Right, and then you have the mysterious death of Michael Hastings several months ago.
Right. Well, that's another, certainly a piece of cheese for the conspiracy theory ants to climb all over. I feel horrible about that, and I'm not up to speed exactly on the minutiae of the investigation in exactly the way I am with this, but you have, anytime you have an example in the United States where, there also was a Fox News journalist. I know I've said James Risen a minute ago. There's a Fox News journalist named James Rosen who it was revealed that the FBI had been tracking his movements in and out of the State Department involving a leaked case that had to do with some documents pertaining to North Korea about a year and a half ago. So that case kind of blew into the open last spring. There's a number of these cases around. So I think really to give you just, I'm in Washington, the sort of Washington mentality on this, and I know you're going to have listeners who think, okay, now it's time to turn my ears off because those people don't know anything. The sort of Washington perspective on this is that will the Supreme Court weigh in on this in such a way that clarifies whether or not journalists are truly protected under the U.S. Constitution.
And you got Senator Feinstein who she wants Congress to pass a bill defining who and what is a journalist.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's going to be tricky because with this sort of digital revolution of the last 20 years, you've got all kinds of new sources out there that.
Under the Feinstein rule, I wouldn't be a journalist, even though I've been on the air 15 years and we have reported a lot of major stories. But I wouldn't fall under her guidelines, so I would be subject to who knows what under her regime. Last question, Guy. Among your peers in Washington, when you get together after work and you're just talking with other reporters, what is the general atmosphere among reporters right now? Is there a chill? Is there a chill?
Absolutely, yeah, there is. I mean, it's a difficult town to work in. I think the Obama administration does have a reputation for being a little bit more standoffish towards the media, and part of this has to do with this so-called war on leaks. And I just want to make sure, and that's not just like, oh yeah, they're feeding everything to the New York Times and being difficult to everybody else. This is something that goes for everybody, whether you're perceived to be right-wing media, left-wing media, centrist. I mean, it's just we're living in a time here where there's this administration has really clamped down, and so yeah, there is. It's not a sense of fear; it's more a sense of frustration that the government these days doesn't really see journalists as a way to tell the government story. I think, just a kind of roundabout point on that, had the Obama administration seen traditional journalists as a good way to tell a story, then the administration might have done a better job selling its Affordable Care Act bill, and that hasn't happened because trying even just to get basic information about the program has been difficult when you come up against standoffish government officials. Now you can imagine that standoffishness is exacerbated and escalated when you start talking about national security matters, such as how many undercover agents there are guarding against suspected terrorists on commercial flights.
And anything can be classified today as national security or a terrorist-related activity, and then, the full weight of the U.S. government comes down on you because of it. Now, ironically, Guy, Israel is furious with the Obama administration. They have been for quite some time because a number of very sensitive issues regarding Israel have been deliberately leaked by the Obama administration, and they don't seem to be worried about the fact that they're leaking information that harms Israel's national interests. So,
no, it's certainly been interesting to watch that play out during the Obama years. I mean, I think it's funny though. I think there's two sides to that too. I read a piece this morning in Haaretz, one of the Israeli dailies, that talked about how there's actually quite a bit of frustration inside Israel towards the Netanyahu government for not being open to the possibility of peaceful talks with either the Palestinians or the Iranians. But I definitely think that you've got to remember with Barack Obama's relationship with Israel that now you've got John Kerry running in the middle, and Kerry's relationships, while he's definitely a solid member of the traditional left camp, I mean, John Kerry's relationships with individuals in power in the Middle East go back quite a bit farther than even George W. Bush's, so let alone Barack Obama. So that kind of throws an interesting iron into the whole thing. I mean, I think you got to remember that the U.S. Israeli relationship has kind of done a lot of twists and turns, but it's never quite emerged from the Iran-Contra era, when the United States was colluding with both Tehran and Israel to try and pursue a very dubious foreign policy in Latin America. So there's a lot of pieces to that whole thing, but it's definitely. I think it was. You have to look at the fact also that Benjamin Netanyahu came to Washington. When he comes here, he bows down and goes to the White House and shows the same respect to the leader of the free world that any Israeli prime minister has done for any other U.S. president. But there's definitely some tension there. I don't know that there's an exception at play, that the Obama administration is carefully and strategically leaking some stories and not others, but I think we have to ask that question seriously and keep a close eye on it.
Hey, one more last question. Have you heard anything about, there are reports coming out of Egypt that a group of Egyptian lawyers filed criminal charges in the International Criminal Court against Barack Obama and his half-brother Malik for their association with the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Have you heard anything about those charges?
I haven't heard about that at all. When I hear that stuff, I think you gotta realize that the United States is pursuing a lot of policies, very realistic policies in the Middle East that anger certain segments of the population there, and the Obama administration has continued pursuing those policies. So,
but Malik, his half brother, is actually on the payroll of the Muslim Brotherhood in Sudan. And so
you've got these documents that show that?
Yeah, you can check it out. Check out Raymond Ibrahim. It's reported quite extensively in the Egyptian news, but I was just wondering there at the State Department whether you've heard anything about these criminal charges. I appreciate you taking time. I'm going to let you go because I know you got to get back to work. My guest, Mr. Guy Taylor, he's the State Department correspondent for the Washington Times. Thank you, Guy.
Rick, thanks for having me. Happy to do it anytime.
Well, once again, True News has delivered a very unique newscast to the body of Jesus Christ. You heard information tonight that is suppressed by the establishment-controlled news media. Now, it's important that you understand that True News has a small staff and a small budget, and we go up every day against the mainstream news media that has billions of dollars and thousands of employees to deceive you, not to inform you, but to deceive you. Sadly, the vast majority of Christians are clueless about what is happening in the world around them. My job is not to wake them up. My job is to keep you awake. I am your no-dose pill dispensed by heaven to keep the end-time church wide awake through very perilous times. Now, we operate this ministry on faith. We do not have any organized fundraising operation. We do our job as faithfully as possible while trusting that our Heavenly Father will supply all our needs, and He has done so for 15 years. We urgently need reinforcements from the end-time army of saints to stand with us. Would you consider joining the fight to keep True News going strong and to hold up our arms so that we do not become weary? Please consider becoming a regular, recurring monthly partner with True News. Click on TrueNews.com, go to support, and make the most generous donation possible. Thank you.